What's up, guys? This is Fight Commentary Breakdowns. I got a very awesome guest, Saul Stevens. He's sometimes known as Viking, as F. He's a professional MMA fighter, and before going professional, he had already many amateur fights. So his training briefly, before doing MMA, he was very big on judo. He did judo basically all of his life until he graduated, and then he just went into MMA, and now he's MMA. So, Saul, man, thank you so much for joining.
No, thanks for having me, Jerry. I appreciate it.
So tell me about your journey. How did you discover judo?
I was always a martial arts enthusiast, but I grew up in a really small town in Wisconsin, and there really wasn't a whole lot to do. I mean, short of a couple sports. I mean, even our high school really didn't even have at that time it was still elementary school, but a lot of the extracurricular activities, there's maybe 3 sports to choose from. I did baseball, but I was always a martial art enthusiast. I don't know. I just finally we ended up moving into a bigger city. And I just kind of was flipping through a phone book, and I found the first gym that was, well, not gym, but first place that was close. And I went in, and I found out, that I was originally looking for a Taekwondo studio, and in the phone book, it was listed as that. But when I ended up going there, I found out that they were primarily judo jiu-jitsu. And so I'm like, okay, that's cool. I mean, I wasn't quite familiar with that. And once I kind of learned more, it was like, oh, this is, it's more of a grappling art. And I'm like, that was always something that I was always practicing striking and self-teaching myself that. And I always felt like ground was something I was uncomfortable with. Yeah. So I'm like, hey, why not? I was like, we might as well give this a try. Now that I found out, interesting enough, the head instructor there was also the assistant district attorney for Chippewa Falls.
What?
So, yeah. Wow. I was like, hey, why not? And a couple of classes, and I just felt, I always kind of struggled finding extracurricular activities that I wanted to do. And like I said, I was always into martial arts. So after a couple classes, I mean, we were just learning ukemi break falls. And after that, I was hooked. That was that enough right there. I was like, this is cool. This is where I belong. This is my outlet. And yeah, I just kept on doing that pretty much until I started that in 07, 08. And I went on until pretty much, 2013. I was competing and training, and yeah.
Wow. Tell me about those ukemi break falls. Did you start out, because I have this very old Japanese jiu-jitsu book, and it teaches you very interesting break falls, how to progress to the point where you can land. Because first it's you're on your back, and then you learn to slap your, basically it's like a cross lateral exercise. You learn to slap your right hand, and then you learn to use your left foot. So it's like that, and then you do it the other way. Left hand, right foot, and then maybe you start with a rope, so you're slightly hovering above the mat, and then you fall down until you can get to the point where you completely stand and do it, and then you get thrown. Is that how you guys did it, or you guys do it a different way?
Yeah, there was definitely a progression leading to being able to effectively break fall from actually being thrown. I mean, our school was it was pretty quick to, I think we spent maybe a couple drills of each break fall, and then it was kind of okay, now I'm going to throw you and try break falling. And yeah, there was definitely a progression. It was, first it was the biggest thing we did was learning how to for the back fall, it was keeping your back rounded so you didn't accidentally, get whiplash or, have your head snap back. So it was kind of learning. It was actually just kind of sitting there doing a pill bug, kind of rolling back and forth, kind of keeping yourself in a rocking chair kind of thing.
I see.
The rest of them were pretty much, it was just, most of them, that's pretty much what it was. It was kind of letting your body kind of roll to distribute that force. And then that slap at the end, it was kind of just it's definitely necessary, but I felt like it was more, the rest of the form mattered more than actually hitting the ground to distribute. So, there was times after that I did actually there was times where I've fallen not on tatami but on asphalt and stuff, and I did everything else right, but I didn't quite slap because just that seems counterintuitive. Yeah. So, but it still worked. I had times I flew off my bike while I was getting ready for a big comp, and I just kind of break fall out of it, and I was just wow, this actually worked.
Wow.
Because you think on tatami, it's you're on a mat, so really how bad could it be? And then actually landing hard on a hard surface and being able to distribute that fall and come out pretty much unscathed. I was like, that's impressive. That's when it really just dawned on me, this is legit.
Yeah, I see. So I'm learning a lot of great stuff already from you. It's like really get the body mechanics, like the macro stuff. Like the slap is not as important as the macro stuff, like how to roll out of it and stuff like that, how to keep your back the certain way. That's so interesting.
I mean, some people would probably disagree. Like, there's always somebody that would probably disagree with my analysis of that particular technique. But yeah, I like the slap. You do need that to some extent, but I would say definitely on a tatami or like a matted surface, definitely makes more sense to do. Like asphalt, I don't know. I wouldn't tell any. I wouldn't suggest it. Like if you do it, cool. But yeah, tatami definitely it helps. It just gives it extra distribution. I'm not a physics guy by any stretch of the word, but like does help, especially getting like thrown by bigger guys and stuff like that. It works.
Yeah. So all right, so you were doing judo and competing. What the decision to go into MMA, like what was that like? Was it kind of like, oh yeah, it makes sense, or was it kind of like a slow decision?
It was always something I wanted to do. I don't know, I kind of dabbled back and forth on it. My school is very traditional, like in a sense that when I eventually started getting ready for my first fight, my instructor was very like, I like that you're challenging yourself, but I don't necessarily agree with you taking it was almost very like movie-esque in terms of like, the style doesn't leave here and you only use it for like, life or death purposes. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but yeah, definitely was like, well, we'll get you ready for this one, but just know that like this isn't what my school is for, and things like that. I am confident in what we've taught you in your technique, but we still don't feel quite comfortable getting you ready for it. I don't know. It was kind of an interesting. It was an interesting kind of process, but yeah, I competed. It was very mixed success. I had times where we'd show up to these events and me and my teammates would completely kill it. And then there was other times where I just couldn't get it. It was frustrating and I felt limited. I felt extremely limited. So I did want to, at some point, I wanted to test myself. I've always been somebody that always seek challenges, especially at that point I felt like I was definitely a martial artist at that point. I wanted to test myself as one, and I felt the best way to do it would be MMA. And not only that, I mean, it did start kind of transitioning into one of the reasons I felt limited and frustrated was because I was going about some of my judo career wrong, but we can always get into that. We can always elaborate on that if you want to.
Yeah, definitely. Please tell me about that.
One of the biggest things is like you go in and like there's always kind of like, for my school, it was always kind of a list of throws that you kind of learn right off the bat. But then after that, you kind of have to discover your own style, and body type is a big factor. I'm 6 foot. I'm I think back then I was still roughly 5'10". I'm still tall and lanky, and I'm sitting here trying to do hip throws and things that are like a shorter guy.
Yeah, exactly. When you said 6 foot, I was like, whoa, that's pretty tall for judo.
Yes, and nothing against the school that I trained with, but they didn't really take that into consideration. Like sometimes it was kind of like you're a tall, lanky guy, and you kind of have to take that into consideration. But it wasn't like, hey, how about instead of like when we're getting ready for comp, instead of doing a hip throw or learning something like that, something that's against your body structure, let's teach you a reap or a sweep or something. And I didn't really start discovering that until kind of later on in my MMA career, that like, because I kind of totally disowned judo once I started training MMA. I'm like, this was a waste of time. I can't get any of these throws right. I can't, especially without a gi, I couldn't hit half of the throws, and I'm like, what am I doing here? But then it's been dawned on me, I'm like, it's like everything martial arts, you have to have things match your body. If you're trying to do something, if you're a short guy and you're trying to, work this long jab against somebody that's longer than you, it isn't going to work. And same thing with throws. If you're trying to hit just like an Ippon Seoinage on somebody that's substantially shorter than you, you have to make up where their center of gravity is. You have to go below that. And if you're already, a few inches above, that's a big motion. And then the guy shucks you to the ground and you look like an idiot.
Yeah. For example, you've seen Coach Paris on my channel. Coach Paris, most of his takedowns are wrestling based because he's 6'2", right? He's really tall. So for him, he's just like, you kind of has some of the same thoughts as you. I mean, we'll have to interview him about that, but I'm trying to empathize with him because he always, like, when he teaches stakes, and he's always teaching wrestling, people keep asking him, dude, Coach Burris teaches judo stuff. He's like, nah. And it's probably because to him, like, it's the same thing. He's so tall, right? It's like he has to get his hips so low, and it just like it just the mechanics don't work as well for a really tall guy.
Right. Not at all. And I mean, in judo, there's I mean, like, well, with any martial art, but especially judo, like, there will always be a counter, and there's a counter to the counter. And I mean, and body mechanics and body structure help segue into a counter being a lot easier to initiate, especially hip throws. A lot of times it's something as simple as, especially if your opponent's taller and their center of gravity isn't lower than yours, all it takes is for you to just drop your weight, drop your center of gravity even just a little bit lower, and you're throwing them instead.
Yeah, exactly. So let's ask you about the first MMA fight, the first amateur fight. What was your feeling like? You're about to step into the ring. Like, did you prepare a lot for it? Was it kind of like, oh, okay, I'll do it. I got a week to prepare. Tell me about, like, the journey.
So I wrote the promoter. Well, actually, it was the matchmaker, and it was about, oh man. So I turned 18 in January, and the fight was in April. So I wrote him like probably a couple weeks right after my birthday, and he's like, yeah, I got a guy for you. Let's do it. I had a buddy of mine too. He was a big Division I wrestler, and so I got him on the card too. And yeah, we were training and getting ready for it. I think my problem was like I went about the MMA fight like I would getting ready for a judo competition, where I was kind of adding some extra stuff on top of it, but I definitely wasn't going about it the right way. Because when I was mostly just going to judo still, or kind of work, like we sparred maybe like once a week at the school, and then I had some buddies in me and my buddy that was fighting, and then a couple other friends of ours, had them come over to, at that time I was staying with my grandpa, and we were just training out of the basement doing like cardio and stuff like that, do a little bit of rolling, and but yeah, I felt like I prepared. I felt like I more than I did when I was getting ready for competition for judo. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was kind of that whole experience was really interesting. I guess like the time getting like counting down to go out to the cage, it was like I felt confident. I was nervous, but I felt confident. I felt like I prepared. I was confident in my skill. But yeah, it unfortunately didn't go in my favor, but yeah, one of the biggest things I noticed was it was the cardio issue, and that's when I realized it was that like they're two completely different things to get prepared for. Again, somebody would probably disagree, but like what I was doing was, like my school is very technique oriented. Kind of did some conditioning like once or twice a week, but it wasn't like super hardcore. It was like, if you're gonna spend time doing that, you should just spend time doing technique. Now I agree with that. Now I disagree with that. I think you need just as much conditioning and everything else as you do technique. But at that time, I still was kind of like, I've been working with this guy for a ton of years. I've had success. I kind of just was like, sure, okay, makes sense.
I'm looking at the record of that first fight, and the armbar he caught you in was the second round. So like you said, like it's a lot about cardio, right? Amateur rounds, is it 2 minutes or 3 minutes per round?
It's 3 3-minute rounds.
3 minute rounds, yeah. So it's like 3 minutes, man. 3 minutes, that's a lot, right? And then probably, and just guessing, after your first round, you sat down in your corner, just like, all right. It was like,
oh yeah, no. Actually, there was a picture that the photographer got of the fight, and it was me talking in my corner, and my mouth guard was hanging out, and I just looked ragged.
Wow.
And I remember that. I was like, I didn't even say anything to him. I just looked at him, and I'm just like, I'm tired. Like, not even saying it. My whole facial expression was just like, wow. Dang, I didn't do this right. I didn't go about this right. And we got 2 more rounds left to go.
Wow. The first round, did both of you kind of go out spending too much energy, like really trying to get like the KO or get the submission that first round?
For me, it was, I kept getting shot on. Oh. I didn't understand. Like, I understood the judo aspect of grappling, but every time, and it was like, I gotta hand it to Mequan. He had my time, like every time I would throw heavy on something, he just shot in for a double, shot in for a
Wow.
double, and I would sit there and I'd get up, or or like what kept happening actually was more if I didn't manage to get up, I kind of just sit and guard because I was comfortable with my jujitsu. I was
Yeah.
comfortable with we worked a lot of off the back stuff in judo too, so I felt comfortable off of that. So
Hmm.
I'd sit there, but we actually the ref would never let us work, and I should have.
What?
Yeah, I would maybe start to set something up, and ref would stop the fight and stand us up. And
Oh.
hilariously enough, not to put on blast, but it was Cecil Peoples, so he kind of has a reputation of his interesting reffing style. That's why he's no longer a ref. But yeah,
Interesting.
I
I
remember.
looked him up, and there were the top articles about him getting kicked down there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was. I barely like. I mean, I can't really like. It was in the middle of the fight, so I really can't remember like how long maybe we were down there. But man, it wasn't enough time to do a whole lot of anything. And I
Wow.
remember him standing me up, and he said something basically the effect that this is a fight and not your significant other. So go out there and
Oh
fight.
man, so it
And I'm
sounds like
like,
that's like a ref who doesn't understand any kind of grappling.
right, and that seemed to be like,
Oh.
I mean, that seemed to be a common criticism of his. So, but yeah, and then so there at that point, I'm kind of like kind of the mental integrity started to just kind of like dissipate because I'm sitting there and I'm like, I just got like totally called out
Yeah.
on this on trying to fight. Like
Yeah.
fighting's incorrect for the sport. Like yeah, it seemed yeah, it was between like the cardio, now my like having this ref kind of grill me
Yeah.
about what I was doing, and I was just like slowly just mentally, I think that was really what killed me. It wasn't even so much the cardio. I was ready to
Yeah.
go. I don't care how tired I was. But all of a sudden just the mental fortitude just started to just dissipate, and I'm like,
Oh.
oh man, like this is not good.
Wow, that's I totally feel you on that. It's like remember how we've watched on my channel some of John Wei Lee's first fights, right? And like half those fights, it looks like the ref was not on her side. I'm sure they like messed her up, man. It's like I totally feel you. That kind of breaks my heart that refs would say stuff like that. Wow, it makes me want to punch the ref. Like if a
Right.
ref said that to me, I was just like, I'll take this loss. I'll just punch the ref in the face, get banned from this promotion.
Right, I wanted to fight so bad. I guess it like at the moment it didn't cross my mind. It was more like, oh man, I'm making the ref mad. I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, now it'd be a totally different story. But all the refs, even on a very yeah, well, just even on the regional level, just they're super professional, very knowledgeable for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna blanket that on everybody. I still got I've got other couple other refs that have some questionable calls and conduct, but most of them are pretty professional, and they uphold what we need as fighters during a competition.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Wow. That's dude, it's so interesting to hear the psychology of stuff because, when Rob and I like look at fights like especially like fights in the ring and stuff, we definitely spot times where we're like something that happened that was outside of the fighter's control messed him up. Like there's this one fight we looked at where the ring was just slippery and the fighter slipped,
Yep.
and you can just tell like mentally he was out of it after that. It's like I'm ready to fight, and then suddenly someone didn't clean the ring properly. I just slipped. That totally messes you up. So it's awesome hearing your story because it's just like yeah, it's man, I feel like that's a fight that should have been ruled no contest too. But it's in the past. It's okay. We all learn from it.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, really, when it came down to it, I mean, guy was still beating me. I mean, it's like you kind of go back and think it was like, if I would have had more time, would have something been different? Maybe, but we
Mm-hmm.
don't know. Other than that, I mean, he was beating me virtually everywhere else for the most part. Like, the only thing was is he'd take me down, he'd be in my guard, he'd hang out with my guard, and I was sitting there, working, and then we get stood up just before I was just starting to kind of transition. And like
Yeah.
I said, I'm not gonna make excuses. He beat me fair and square as far as in the confines of how the fight happened.
Yeah.
Excluding the judge, I mean, excluding the ref, yeah, I mean, he still had me outbeat. Who knows how it could have went? Point is, he was on his game. He was beating me in places I clearly had no business being.
Yeah.
Like just getting shot on alone was enough to. That was enough there for me.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. Let's talk. I mean, we learned a lot of good lessons about this. Let's talk about the first win you had. against Jared Alexander. How did that come out about?
Oh man, so that was I was already I at that point I had 3 straight losses as an amateur.
Mm-hmm.
I changed between, if you count the judo school I was at, 3 gyms.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and then not only that, I dropped the weight class. Because that first fight was at 145, and then the 2 after were at 35.
Mm-hmm.
This 4th fight with Jared Alexander, it was do or die. For me, it was like, okay, I'm 0-3. I mean, I have a lot of people. It's like I was working part-time at Walmart. This was something I wanted to pursue a career in. Like, I just couldn't see myself doing anything else. But I'm like, man, 0-3. Granted, it was an amateur career, but at that time, that was my career, and it was like 0-3. I mean, if I lose this fight, like, I'm just gonna hang it up, you know. But it was do or die for me, and we ended up getting a new coaching staff. The place I was at the time, we had. It was an okay coaching staff, but it wasn't. I don't know. People were like, not to like call people out, but it was people. It was lacking some professionalism. People wanted to. They were trying to profit more off of the aspect of like fitness and having people come in versus guys that wanted to fight. At that time, we had. I think we're getting ready for that fight. I think it was me and 2 other guys that were actually actively competing. Mm-hmm. And and a lot of times we were scheduling our own times to come in and get rounds in the cage and work on a bunch of extra stuff that we weren't necessarily getting during regular gym times. Mm-hmm. So, but just about, I would say like 2 or 3 months, maybe a little bit longer, a little bit more before that fight, we actually ended up having one of a local guy come in that had a pretty good career as an amateur, was always on the cusp of going pro, and then he kept getting injured. Zach Paletta, mm-hmm. and it was a solid wrestling career. Dude was a stud, and not only that, he was super passionate. He was very high fight IQ, very passionate about the game, and very passionate. Not only him training, but us also training and benefiting and getting prepared. And had this whole new mindset and this approach to fighting that I felt like I always had, but I never saw with other coaches. So I thought, damn, like, again, I kind of like started questioning myself. And I had this guy come in, going about the same way of preparation and training as I did, and helped immensely. When in that fight, it was like, I want to say it was like minute 55 first round. Mm-hmm. And I hit some nice slips and took his back, and it was pretty much, beginning of the end.
Yeah, you took his back and then rear naked choke.
Yes.
I see. So I bet that really helped you. Like, you're like gained your bearing. You had this cool coach who really taught you stuff. So that was like, okay, I think I am on the right path now.
Yes, definitely. I was just like, this is what I needed. It was, I had it in me, and I had a lot of stuff. Like, I always tell people, like, I needed those 3 losses. I wouldn't be the fighter I am today if I wouldn't have had those 3 losses. Yeah. I learned a ton from those fights. But I also needed the change of the coaching staff and things too. It became way more cohesive, and everyone was on the same page. And I think that was like the biggest thing a lot of us at that gym needed, where we just needed a schedule that was fit for fighters and MMA competition, not some soccer moms getting some cardio kickboxing. And, the occasional, like, okay, this is what fighters would do, but we're not going to really focus on that a whole lot, because a lot of classes were still tailored to new guys coming in. We didn't have, like, an intermediate or even, like, a fighter class. It was all, like I said, you had soccer moms, no offense to soccer moms out there, but, to guys that are just kind of dabbling, to hobbyists, to guys that wanted to fight, guys that were actively competing, and can't have that. And if you do, you need a coaching staff that can kind of bounce around to those different clients or those different students and be able to, tailor that lesson to work for what they're there for. Yeah. We just weren't getting that until Zach came in.
Yeah. It's funny you talk about soccer moms. I'll completely relate to you. So right before this apocalypse happened, I started training in boxing, and I looked at so many boxing gyms, and because this is Santa Monica, this is the LA area, there's a lot of like hippie, vegan, actorish crowds. Most of the
Okay.
boxing gyms were catering towards them, like either catering towards soccer moms or catering towards actors. So it's all about like the almost like the cardio fitness part of it, which we have established is very important. But
Yes.
for me, I wanted to train, so I wanted to be able to, if I sparred someone in the ring, I'd be able to like hold my own, right? So
Right.
like it took me a while to be like, okay, this boxing gym, they seem like the classic way of training where it's like half of it's jump roping and cardio, but the other half's really just working on solid pure technique. No flourishes, no kind of like combining the like the crossfitting and the like all that stuff that
Right,
like soccer
that's-
moms want. But like I know exactly what you mean. Like if you go to a gym that's more catering towards that, you might get okay martial arts, but you're definitely not going to get the best. Like they're not training you to go into the ring.
Yeah, if you want to fight, it's definitely it's not gonna work.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just not gonna work because sad thing is typically when you do that, technique suffers quite a bit.
Yeah.
Again, like I said, there are probably some gyms out there that are able to have that cohesion where they're able to have the cardio and still have good technique and still maybe cater to more less of a fighter class and more of just a fitness clientele. But what I've experienced is, I mean, a lot of the gyms I went to, that was their Achilles heel, was they wanted to cater to what made them money, and from a business standpoint, I understand that.
Yeah.
But you can't have young guys coming in wanting to fight and taking fights and kind of giving them this promise that I'll get you ready for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's not how it is. I mean, at the end of the day, whether you're an amateur or a pro, you're still putting your body on the line. That's still, you're still getting hit in the head. You're still risking getting joints and everything cranked on. Like you're still putting your well-being at risk no matter what level you're at. It's fighting.
Yeah.
And the fact that coaches out there are willing to risk that is frustrating. And I've experienced it in multiple places with multiple multiple coaches and things like that. And it's rough. I try my best to really steer people. Like if I know people in other gyms, I do my best to like be like, hey, this is what I went through, and kind of steer them towards going towards a gym that actually is going to meet their needs versus just settling, because you can't do that, especially if you're trying to make a career out of it.
Like you said, sometimes 3 losses initially is probably the best thing because it teaches you, 1, grit and perseverance, but 2, it teaches you these are the things I need to work on in my techniques. So it's like in looking back on it, reflecting, you're like, those 3 losses were essential in my martial artist and my MMA journey.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. Tell me about, so you had that first win and then you threw down 2 months later against Eric Hamilton. What was that like?
It was very, I had the words, I kind of lost it. I felt reinvigorated. Like I finally felt like I finally found a style that worked for me. That was something I struggled with too. I didn't really know what my style was. This approach, I had the same coaching staff, mainly Zach Paletta that I had with the last fight. Put in a lot of time with him. My teammate, Quang Lee, we were putting in a ton of time getting ready for this fight. I finally could fight at the weight class I wanted to fight at. That was the other issue I was having early in my career. Was first I didn't understand weight classes, and then when I did, I was still, granted I was 5'11", 6 foot, but I walk around maybe 140, 141 pounds. So cutting 135, I'm fighting guys that are cutting 15 plus pounds and they're manhandling me. That was part of the issue. Like with Jared Alexander, we were both, I'm assuming he was kind of like at the lower end of his weight class. Dude was tough, but I could tell he didn't quite have the build and the strength that I've ran into with other 35ers.
Oh.
So I wanted to cut to 25. Not only that, I knew I could do it, but being 6 foot at 125 pounds, I don't know too many guys that would have that build. I felt like and not only that, at that time, granted I had a judo background, but striking was starting to become my primary strength. Going into even the Jared Alexander fight, I noticed I was more of a striker, and it was more of a footwork thing that I had for strengths and where my style kind of surrounded on. And I'm like, well, now that I'm taller and have this reach, that would be a phenomenal advantage to have going into these fights. And at that time, I knew I could make 25 super easily. And Hamilton was stud wrestler. I think he was like D2 out of Minnesota. I think he won state, something like that. I mean, he had some pretty good accolades. And so going into that, and wrestling was like still my downfall. We trained it a ton going into that fight, but I still went, that's the downside of being a tall guy. Guy wants to shoot in. You're at his disposal if you're really not like crossing your T's and dotting your I's.
Yeah.
And yeah, we went into that fight and shut down pretty much everything he had. That fight is actually out on YouTube. It's part of like the whole card is on one thing, so that's irritating. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think the only shot he got on me was the one I gave to him because I wanted to. Early in the first round, he shot on me, and we're kind of wrestling, and never mind. I guess I gave him two. It's funny going back and trying to remember what happened in the fight because it's like you're in a totally different mindset. Because I'm like sitting here and I'm like, wait, no, he actually did get me one of the shots, but I ended up sinking in a triangle, and it was deep. And he was hitting the back of my neck, tapping, and actually I think too on the video you're able to see that, but ref didn't see it, and I was. Oh
my goodness! Why? It's always the refs, bro. It's always the refs.
I know, and it was like, the angle was bad. I don't blame him. I mean, at that time I was mad, but I don't blame the ref. Like, it was a horrible angle. I was more mad on my opponent that he blatantly tapped, and he's like, no, I didn't tap. What are you talking about? Oh,
my goodness.
But it was my bad that I let go of the choke. The minute I felt him tap, I let go. I was still being mindful of my opponent. I didn't want to, hurt him.
Yeah.
As counterintuitive as that sounds. But I still want to be respectful of my opponent, like, where they're competing, not trying to actually kill each other. So it's like, and I had that triangle sunk in pretty deep, and he's like panic tapping, so I let go. Ref doesn't see it. And the guy just kind of leans back into me and starts going again. I'm like, oh. Luckily, it was towards the end of the round, so I didn't expend too much energy. But at that point, I'm like, that's when the switch really flipped. And I'm like, these next two rounds, he's not gonna. If he didn't like me before, he's not gonna like me now. And yeah, we just kept shutting down shots. I did give him the second round. I did give him one more to get that triangle in again. So I'm like, I had his number the first time.
Yeah.
Let's do it again. Didn't work out, so he scrambled out. And yeah, I mean, just kind of laid into him couldn't get the finish, but laid into him pretty much towards the end of the third round. And man, I can't remember if that was the triangle that I tried to get. I can't quite remember how it went down, but yeah, we ended up in this awkward like side control. He had like my head and my arm all tangled up with his legs, so I was just sitting there like hitting his hamstring until the bell rang. And so not the most impressive way to get out a decision, but I felt good. I shut down this Division II wrestler.
Yeah.
Again, it was one of those things. I still got the decision. I got 2 free rounds to work. At that point, it was like I won 2 times that night.
Exactly.
You're beating him, and now you've mentally broke him. Like, he knows he tapped.
Yeah.
Now he's got to stare down that barrel for 2 more rounds.
Exactly.
Like, go out and just get that extra cage time. You're an amateur. Just milk this cage time. And I'm like, sounds good to me. If you get the finish again, cool. Otherwise, get this time in to use the cage and, get some experience points, I guess.
Yeah. So. Dude, it's so interesting. Like, you can see his wrestling background is solid, but dude, his strikes were just not good, man.
Yeah, and that's what we were betting on.
Like, you guys bet exactly right. Like, his punches are so bad. I mean, not to say I can do any better, but like compared to his wrestling, his punches are so bad.
Definitely a night and day situation. That was the other thing that was awesome about this fight was a lot of the other fights. I was always somebody that wanted to strategize. I felt like as a fighter, I was never a guy that like. Yeah, I have my height and my reach, but I always felt like I wasn't a guy that had like a ton of power. Or had like this one go-to style, like around here in the Midwest, everybody's a stud wrestler or has some wrestling background. I didn't have that. I consider myself more like an all-rounder. Like I I had an extensive judo career, but that's not my style. That's not even where I primarily go to. I even now I've got like I got like 2 or 3 throws, maybe the fundamentals as a whole, but maybe 2 or 3 throws that I hit and I feel confident in. I was, still a judo isn't like oh man, he grabs you, he's gonna throw you sort of thing. So I always like going into fights with a game plan. And that was like Jared Alexander, we kind of had a game plan, but it was kind of like you have all these new skills, just play around with them. We're getting ready for this Eric Hamilton fight. It was, here's the game plan. Here's where you can deviate. Here's where you have to stay. Here's plan A. Here's plan B. Here's plan C. And it was awesome. Like, that was the first time I went into a fight, my 5th fight as an amateur, and finally had like a game plan and contingencies if those game plans didn't work. And it worked. Like, the game plan we went in with and the contingencies we had around all of those, if those didn't work, they all fell into place and worked out effortlessly. Even some of the crazy stuff we're working with, there's one part where he shot in and we just kind of like, we stiff armed him and we're kind of playing around, like shucking his head down and letting him bounce up. We kind of let him, when he really wanted to power up, because one of the wrestling staples is kind of like, when you're on the ground, you go up with your head, and we wanted to really get that like reflex out of him, and he did. He popped up, and we were like, throw a head kick. And it was just something we're screwing around with. We were like, you might hit this, you're probably not, but if it's there, try it out. And sure thing, that fight shucked him down a little bit, and all of a sudden you just feel he wanted to explode up, and he did explode it up. I threw the kick right on the mark, and boom, bounced it right across his head, and I was just like, dang, like, game plans work too.
Yeah. It's amazing. Like, there's 2 ways of interpreting what to do in a match, right? One way is like, I'll just flow with it completely, and I'll just be whatever I see in him, I'm gonna react to it. The other way is like, this is my game plan. No matter what, he's gonna get caught in my game plan, right? And like, different coaches will teach you different things, and I guess probably there's a compromise between the two, and like, you got to do both. And I guess that's what you're learning throughout your kind of amateur fights. It's like, sometimes the game plan works, sometimes the flowing works, sometimes they both work. It's like, that's what makes fighting so fun. It's like kind of chess, but also kind of like flow. It's like, there's so many aspects to it.
Right. And well, I think the biggest thing is, I think you need to be able to go into a competition with both. You need to be able to adjust on the fly and flow and trust with what you have. But at the same time, if you have an opponent that has tape out there and it's recent and you're able to analyze that, why you gotta take that into consideration too. Like, early in amateur careers, I get you have to maybe more rely on your technique and your flow, because a lot of guys don't have tape out there. Maybe you can catch like wrestling videos or like some jiu-jitsu stuff, or maybe you catch a training vid that a different teammate had put up. But a lot of times, they haven't competed yet or competed enough where you're not able to find a whole lot of video. Even with Eric Hamilton, he had like no video. He did pancration, and a lot of those pancration fights weren't filmed. Luckily, my one of my coaches was at one of the fights where he was doing pancration, was able to take notes on him. Luckily, full coincidental thing. And then other than that, we did find a couple of like videos he had with a teammate rolling. And we just kind of really dove into his wrestling career in high school, and that's kind of where we formulated our game plan off of.
Wow, that's so interesting. Just like how fighters prepare and research their opponents. It's like another topic for another time, but it's like hearing you, how it's like, we got no 5 footage, etc. Like a coach happened to be at one of his competitions to take notes. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. And I'm sure your opponents probably did research on you too. So like what you're telling me, they probably were doing the same thing on you.
Yeah, no, definitely. And with me, pretty much, I think all my fights were up on YouTube at the time, short of my very first fight. And yeah, I mean, definitely 2 fights. Like, I think they're still the first 2 that pop up, and they're, that pop up on YouTube. And it's, that it's a lot of good stuff to go off of. The funny thing was, though, is I trained so hard and made so many adjustments between those 2 fights that I wasn't even the same fighter at that point. So I'm like, go ahead, watch those videos. Yeah. Get misled. Think that I have these weaknesses and try to capitalize on them, because they're not anymore. They weren't weaknesses. It's like, so that was the good thing I can always go on. Even now, it's like, I feel like I try to improve and change my game up enough where like I have a style now that I fit into, but I'm always working something new. I always feel like if I can go back to the guy I was previous competition, I would beat him by a mile at the least. That's always kind of like my preparation mindset. So when I'm like sitting there thinking, okay, a guy's watching my video right now, like what is he gonna see? And it's like he's gonna commit to a bunch of these habits and things he thinks I still have, but trust me, I prepare. I don't depend on my strength. I don't depend on anything but my preparation. That's my main attribute. So I'm always constantly I'm watching those videos just as much as my opponents are, if not more, and trying to see what they see and trying to patch those holes up.
Makes sense. So let's jump a little forward to your last amateur fight. You fought Brandon Sadgraves. Were you kind of before the fight thinking, okay, if I win this, I'm going to go professional? Or was it kind of like you won it and then you got approached to go professional? What was the
This is when I was writing you. This was the particular part in my career where I was thinking of when I wrote Crazy Amateur Career. Because what happened was I had, and it's like the number sounds ridiculous, but I had probably about 9 fights fall through leading up to that. Was it Brandon? No, Brandon. No. Okay, so I had a bunch of fights fall through though. I had a title fight right after I fought Kai Bronk. After that, like that video sort of went viral like on the regional scene because it was a good fight. I think you can find that one. You probably pull that one up too. It's a little grainy and stuff. So the camera's like really far away, but that one, it was controversial with the way it was ended as a no contest, but this was this top Minnesota contender, and you know, this was the guy to beat at flyweight, and I pretty much ran the floor with him. Like it was probably one of my easier fights. Again, not trying to be a jerk. Like he's still like I took him very seriously. I watched his videos. Like I knew this guy was tough, so I prepared for it, and it just happened that my preparation made the fight seem very easy. I'm not taking anything away from him, but
I see.
Very easy. It was a very, very easy fight. I went in there, we worked the game plan, and it was just boom, 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 and yeah, it went very smooth. It ended in a way that we didn't want it to end. But right after that, my coach comes in. At this time, I moved to Milwaukee. I was training with Pura Vida. My coach Jake Clipp comes in and he's like, I don't care that you lost. He's like, you beat him, you beat a top contender. He said, and if that was a pro fight, we wouldn't even have to worry about that. He's like, we're getting you a title fight, and then after that, we're seriously considering a pro career or moving to pro. So I'm like, cool. And right after that, trying to get a fight was almost near impossible. The title fight he had lined up for me was probably that lined up good. It was actually the night of the fight, and the guy was messing around the cage with a teammate and split his lip.
Ugh.
And athletic commission's like, nope, we got to stitch that up. You can't fight tonight. So, and this is my biggest fight of my career so far. I trained really hard. The weight cut was tough. I was starting, at this time it was like, I made my first cut to 125 when I was like 19. I still didn't quite grow in my body yet. It's like this fight I was, 23. I'm starting to really grow into my body now, and 125 just wasn't working anymore. But I still made the cut. It was rough, but it was like I made a lot of sacrifices, and I trained hard for this fight, for this guy to just go screw around before the fight starts and get his lip split open. And so yeah, that fight fell through, and then after that it was like near to impossible trying to get fights. And a lot of guys were like the one promoter, he was like, it was a fight with Kai Bronk. He said even though it was a no contest, he's like, people don't want to fight him after that. People don't want to deal with that. They watched this guy go from 0-3 to now he's just tearing up the regional scene. Who wants to deal with that? And yeah, I think I had 9 different cards lined up between finally getting a title fight and having multiple guys drop the fight in between cards. So, I mean, if you want to go into opponents, I mean, we probably could be like, I don't know, maybe a dozen more. I mean, I swear it was every card. It was like, he fell through, we got this guy. Okay, he doesn't want to fight you anymore either. We got this guy. Okay, well, that card got scrapped. Let's go to the next card. And it was just, I spent like 6 months doing that. And I
Wow.
finally looked at my coach. I was like, I don't care if it's bantamweight, featherweight, lightweight. I'm like, just get me in a fight. I can't do this. I need to fight.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily we got, I think it was like August or I think it was summer. It was like spring or summer. We finally got a fight lined up. First title fight. I feel terrible. I keep blanking out like half my opponent's names, but
Good.
dude was like, I want to say he was 4-0, stud striker. Really, really doing good on the regional scene. I think he was out of Illinois, and yeah, like this is a tough guy, and ended up getting that fight locked in. But the whole time, I'm waiting for this guy to drop out. There was all this like extra mental blockage that you don't want to deal with getting ready for a fight. You don't want to sit there and every day kind of go into like, man, what happens if he bails out? What happens if this? But yeah, I went in there and yeah, it was a decision, but yeah, we stuck to a game plan and yeah, cleaned that fight up pretty nicely too. That's the fight I wish would be up for people to watch. That was a good fight. I try not to pat myself on the back too much, but I was proud of that fight. That was good.
Totally. So yeah, I was looking on YouTube while you were talking about it, and I couldn't find that one either. It seemed like, but what is available is the Brandon one after that one. So it looks like even in between Brandon and the opponent before that, Christian, there were all these other canceled bouts too, man. That must be so mentally taxing.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was frustrating. I was, like I said, I was starting to go into training kind of like holding back, thinking, man, if I sit here and just floor it going into training and all of a sudden it falls through again, like, man, then what?
Yeah.
So, like, we have hard training camps, like, at Pura Vida, like, we've got UFC fighters, we've got, top regional contenders, we've got some serious guys in that gym. And going toe to toe with them, and everybody's getting ready for fights all the time. Everybody's staying fight ready, and that's time and miles putting on my body too. And I'm just sitting there like, man, this fight falls through again, getting ready for this because it was like the never-ending training camp.
Yeah.
And the intensity changes. When you're not in training camp, the intensity is tapered off. But when you are in training camp, you are getting a lot more sparring rounds in. You're getting a lot more intensity, and you are putting in a lot more classes. And yeah, I was doing that for like 6 months straight. And I was just like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I was starting to get mentally taxed. And I'm like, I need a break. I'm going to need a break if something doesn't happen here. Or I need to fight.
Yeah. And so when you finally got that match with Brandon, it must have been like, okay, all right, let's just make sure this happens and let's go from there.
Yeah, no, I knew that. Well, with Brandon, I knew he was game. Like, he's been, if I remember right, I mean, that guy's been on the circuit just as long as I have, and very passionate martial artist and super cool guy. Actually, like, after the fight, talked to him and like got to know him a lot better. And yeah, super solid guy. Like, see a lot of myself in him, and yeah, super cool. But I kind of got that from him leading up to the fight, and it was cool. But I guess now talking about it, I do remember we had 2 cards that we were hosting, and they were a week apart. And I was supposed to fight on the Milwaukee card, and he ended up going, I can't get off for the fight, and we did have to reschedule it. I do remember that now, and I was like, oh man, like really, like the one guy I didn't think was gonna flake out on me bailed.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, no, I've had enough of this. Luckily, we were able to get on the Oshkosh card a week later, and get the fight done. But yeah, I do remember that we did have to get rescheduled. I'm like, oh man, not again. Please not again.
Yeah. So after that Brandon fight, what was the process like? Because it took you about a year to have your next fight. So what was the process like going professional?
Usually, so like with Pura Vida, we tend to, when getting like, it seems like every fighter, unless it's a very like out of the ordinary reason, most of the time the coaches are very good about giving you about a year's time to transition into taking your pro fight.
Oh.
So that's kind of what that was there. That was just kind of the coaches going, okay, like, you've established yourself as, with the skill set and the experience to move on to pro. but now we want you spending this next year not only recovering and getting yourself 100% healthy relative term in the MMA world, but we want you working on stuff. We want you to, you know, round out your game even more and get better at the things you're already good at, and we want your skill set to be completely different by the time you're ready for this pro fight. We want this pro fight to be easier than your hardest amateur fight.
Yeah.
It's kind of the mindset that they have. So yeah, that was kind of what it was. It was just kind of taking the time to get ready for that, and trying to think of any fights dropped out in between that. I don't think there was, but yeah, that's where the time gap kind of happened there.
Makes
and
sense.
But yeah, we prepared, really worked on stuff. One of the other big things too is focusing on like new rule set. Like even though it's just elbows and knees now, well, Wisconsin you can do knees to the body, but not knee to the head. And then elbows not at all as an amateur. So you are learning to incorporate all these things into your skill set now, using your elbows and being able to knee the head, and it totally changes the game. Not only that, like as an amateur, you can kind of hang out by someone's knees and not have to worry about getting knee to the head. Like some guys, their techniques center around exploiting those move sets, and they kind of, I mean, the rule set, and they try, you know, the coaches are very good about trying to like get you past that too, like not let you depend on that amateur rule set so you don't make a bad decision where you're sitting there hanging out, you know, kind of bent at the waist. Next thing you know, you get popped in the face of the knee.
Yeah.
You know, you're hanging out in side control or in a bad, you know, you're in a non-dominant position, guys raining elbows on you, and you're sitting there going, oh, I'm not used to this.
Yeah.
Another reason why they're good about taking extra time before taking that step into a professional bout.
Makes sense. Wow. Okay, so then it was PFC 12 and Friday Night Cage Fights. That's a pretty cool name too. So tell me about that night, your first, you know, professional fight. How did it feel? Where were you in the fight card? Was it towards the end, towards the beginning, towards the middle?
Actually, I guess I don't remember where. Oh, nope, I was towards the end. Typically, so PFC is the card that is a promotion that my gym Pura Vida hosts, and they're very good about like it's always I had to remember it's they're always, amateurs are always first, and then towards the end of the night it's, you know, you move into your pros, and then, you know, co-main event. And yeah, so it was more towards the end of the night, which I was kind of used to at that point. A lot of like my title fights were later, so that's kind of how the cards were structured: amateur title fights, pro fights, and then pro title fights if there are any. Which on the regional scene doesn't happen too often, but well, in the Midwest anyway. And then but yeah, so it was later in the night. I was really zoned in. I've been wanting this, you know, since I was since 2013. I mean, this was last year. I mean, it was like a day or two after my birthday that fight happened. So it's like, this was 3-4 years in the making.
Wow.
And I just wanted it. I was super excited. I mean, I always have this tendency to get a little nervous before I go out. And I always did. I got nervous, and I'm like, oh, okay. You know, like I have this horrible tendency, just even in daily life, to really play around with what ifs and like worst case scenario, and I do that with my fighting too. And it's a strength and it's a double-edged sword. It's a strength and a weakness. And but yeah, I was dialed in. I was ready to go. And yeah, once I heard the walkout music and everything, I just ran to the cage. I didn't even walk. I sprinted to the cage, and I was ready to put some work in.
Nice.
And yeah, we were able to go in, use a new move set. Used a lot of elbows. Actually, that's how I ended up winning the fight, was TKO via elbows out of a crucifix. And yeah, I mean, so landed some good knees too. Wasn't able to land any to the head, which was kind of a bummer, but yeah, landed some solid knees, and through elbows, and you know, worked a solid game. Was able to incorporate some new tools with the new move set, and I meant new rule set. And ended up getting a win, and not too much after a normal amateur like time. You know, it was a little after the 3-minute mark.
Wow.
Now that's something I got to get used to is that having more time to work, because that's what was happening. Was I kind of like for me, I kind of am able to sort of during the fight kind of have an idea of where I'm at in the
Mm.
fight in terms of time, and my brain was still kind of like dialed in on like a 3 minute sort of
Mm.
intuition. So I'm sitting there and I'm kind of like rushing the finish, thinking I was run out of time, but really was like, nah, you barely went into a minute of a pro round. You barely made it into a pro round. So I was like, oh, I got it. That's something I got to get better about. But
Wow.
otherwise, but still, was like finished it pretty quickly, went really smooth, and yeah, it was a good pro debut. It felt
Wow.
great.
Yeah, I was trying to find it on YouTube, but I don't think it
That one
got
is
posted
yeah,
on
that one
YouTube.
is not up,
Oh
sadly.
man, yeah. Well, if we ever find it, we'll definitely follow up and put it on. What do you think is gonna happen now? Right now we have the apocalypse going on, but before then, were you planning on like scheduling a bunch of other fights, or what's your plan now?
Well, life kind of got a little bumpy the last like year now.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up having to move back from Milwaukee back to Chippewa Falls.
Mm.
My girlfriend has some health problems. I ended up having to have knee surgery. I'm still recovering from that.
Mm-hmm.
So I have that amongst a bunch of other things that kind of happened over that time. I ended up just kind of I mentally just checked out. I'm looking back at a lot of things we talk about a lot of the mental aspect of the game, and I keep sounding like that seems to be my weak point, but it's not. It's really not. It's like it's
Mm-hmm.
something that I train all the time, and I do have a little bit of a life outside of this, and sometimes it does kind of creep in. Like
Mm.
that's how it happens. But yeah, it was kind of just it was an accumulation of things, and it ended up yeah, I wasn't even when I was in town. I mean, when I was in Milwaukee, towards the end there, I wasn't getting into the gym a whole lot.
Mm.
Um, I took a pro kickboxing bout last April to
Wow.
try to kind of like get back in motion of things, and fought against a guy that was he just made his pro debut too. We're both kind of on the same like trajectory as far as career goes, and it was kind of like let's get this matched up so we can kind of gauge where you're at. Because if you can beat this guy in kick, like striking is where you're at, and if you can beat this guy striking, like definitely we know where you're gonna be at when you have to like. He's one of those guys that like you're on trajectory to you're gonna have to fight him
Yeah.
at some pivotal point in your career. Like you guys are gonna end up crossing paths, MMA wise. So like let's do it's too early for that now, MMA wise. Like, you guys don't want, like, one of you guys got to take a loss, and you guys are both on fire as far as your career, like,
Yeah.
your pro debuts are. So, let's do a kickboxing fight. We can kind of figure out where you're at. And, yeah, I wasn't there for that camp at all. I was struggling with some health stuff. It was like my girlfriend's health was kind of going downhill, too.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, some other life things were starting to creep up, too, and it was really taking away from being able to train. Mostly it was the health stuff leading into it. It was hard to train. It was hard to put in rounds,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm the type of guy where I don't like to quit. I just don't like, I should have really just said, just hang this fight up. It's not even important, but I'm like, no, this is a challenge. You got to take this fight. You don't back down from fights.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was not a good call on my part. The fight
Mm.
ended up, it was good when I was feeling good, but all of a sudden I hit this wall, and man, it's a wall I haven't hit in a long time. I don't think even like in one of my worst fights, I don't think I've ever hit a wall quite that bad. All of a sudden I hit this wall, and I wasn't there, and I didn't take a whole lot of damage, but it was definitely still not damage I wanted to take.
Mm.
Ended up losing the fight. I think they ruled it a KO. I got knee to the stomach and couldn't answer the bell. Um, but yeah, after that I was just like I got to reassess some things in my life, and
Mm-hmm.
at that time, all the other stuff I was worrying about in that camp kind of came crashing down, and so it was like it worked out in a sense. It's like I get to back off, kind of decompress from everything, recover, heal. Then during that, I found out I needed knee surgery. So I'm
Mm.
like, okay, we'll get this taken care of too. Already taking time off, might as well get fixed up in the
Yeah,
process.
exactly.
And yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at now. And yeah, I mean, we're aiming to move back in like fall, winter. Like I'm aiming for December, like at the latest, to get back to Milwaukee and start training. I'm hoping once I get the okay from my doctor, I can start actually making the commute down to Milwaukee and just start training again. But I still got probably about 3 months recovery time on my knee.
Makes
So
sense. Do you mind telling us what happened to your knee? Was it an ACL tear or something
it
else?
was a meniscus tear. Yeah,
Meniscus tear.
it was
Okay.
a medial meniscus. It was a 2 centimeter, 2 centimeter long tear. I'm pretty sure I had it for at least like 4 of my fights.
Mm-hmm.
I might have even been dealing with it before that. Uh, what ended up happening though was like, so with the meniscus, you typically don't, like, the surgeon doesn't quite know the scope of it. You have an MRI and things, but like
Mm-hmm.
they don't quite know the scope of it until they get inside.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's a lot of contingent recovery times. What ended up happening was I was able to have a full meniscus repair.
Oh, good.
So instead of removing the meniscus, they're able to suture it. But problem with that is blood supply is very limited in that area, and so now that it was for 2 centimeters doesn't seem very big, but I guess in terms of a meniscal repair, it's a decent size from what I understand. And between that and lack of blood supply, I was 6 weeks on crutches,
Wow.
and then yeah, I just started being able to walk without crutches last Friday.
Wow.
So, yeah, and now I'm looking at another 3 to 4 months of rehab, and then I can start maybe thinking about like running and jumping and doing like basic athletic movements. Like even now, I still can't even run
Wow.
or like lean too much on that foot. So there's that kind of dealing with that too right now.
Wow. That's so. And I'm so just thankful that you shared this with us because combat sports. A lot of these things are no joke, and like I think anyone that wants to get into this also has to remember like there are things like this you have to prepare for. Some people
Right.
have a career and like they never get hurt, but that's very rare.
Very rare.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's not even just competition. Like a lot of my injuries have occurred training. They're
Yeah.
not. I think the only injury I can really think of from a fight was my first loss. My arm was like super tweaked 'cause I fought the arm bar, and
Mm-hmm.
that was it. That was a couple weeks and I was good again and
Yeah.
have no problems. Where a lot of my other injuries, it's like they were during training, they were
Yeah.
during camps, they were, and it's other factors you have to worry about too. It's like, sometimes you get teammates that have ego problems and stuff too, and all of a sudden they're just teeing off on
Yeah.
you. And that's another thing, you're weighing that in, and or like with the meniscus, I think I know right when it happened, and all I was doing was I was bouncing on that leg
Mm-hmm.
while I was in a single leg.
Mm-hmm.
I was in a single leg, kind of bouncing around, keeping my balance, and that's when I felt like this wet, like crunch tear kind of like sensation, and you almost could hear it too. At least I think I could.
Wow.
It's another one of those things, like feeling and hearing almost kind of go hand in hand with injuries.
Yeah.
Very kind of bizarre thing, and but yeah, training. So yeah, again, it's something that like even just training, even if you're just a hobbyist, you're still it's combat sports. You're
Yeah.
still putting your body at risk,
Yeah.
definitely.
Totally, man. It's crazy. And my hope with all of this is that as medical technology gets better, there would be like cooler and cooler, easier, less invasive treatments for all this stuff. Like I had a friend who had a knee problem. He got like stem cells injected in there, and he was on
Okay.
crutches for a little bit, but apparently it helped him. So he didn't need surgery. And I hope like with stuff like this in the future, there'll be more treatments like that. Like they'll take stem cells out of you and like inject it into the meniscus or something, and it heals.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really hope that happens because there's a lot of guys where their careers get ended because things like this. I mean, the sad reality is typically once you have an injury, you have a way higher probability of re-injuring it again.
Of course, yes.
With anything, and
Yeah.
it's like it would be cool someday to not have to worry about that.
Yeah, I agree. I think like combat sports is so fun because it's like the ultimate chess game. But the problem with the ultimate chess game is that you're putting your body on so much on the line. And that's
Yes.
why I love interviewing like people who fought in the ring because like you guys are the real gladiators. Like you guys are
Thank
no
you.
joke, right? And it's like that's why there's so many keyboard warriors too who like always talk smack about fighters. And I'm like, you guys do understand. Like one person that gets it a lot on my channel is Coach Paris. I don't know why people. Maybe because Coach Paris looks like a metalhead, people just like talking smack about metalheads or something. But like people always talk smack about Coach Paris, and I have to remind people. And I've said this with a couple of people I've talked to too. Like Coach Paris has permanent tinnitus because he's getting punched in the head all the time. Like,
Yeah.
you know, this is stuff that people who never train don't realize. Like, it takes a toll on your body to get that good. Like, Coach Paris has like 6 black belts. Like, every black belt probably gave him a permanent injury.
Right, it probably took years off his lifespan.
Exactly.
When people don't realize that. I mean, I'm sure, and I feel that. I feel like 'cause even with me too, is like during the height of my career, is like during the end of my amateur career, it's like my hair was like super long, and people were just like, nah, totally getting judged by your appearance, and it's like, yeah, I totally feel what he's going through, where like just something as simple as your appearance can really bring out like people wanting to talk smack and like put judgment on something that you actually have a pretty good hand in, like experience and technicality. It's like
yeah.
It is funny though.
And for Fight Commentary viewers, I will link all of Saul's fights. What I'll probably do is I'll edit this and I'll put some of his fights in the corner so you guys can watch it while you watch the conversation. But I noticed, Saul, it's really cool that you like have a little man bun sometimes when you fight. That's like a style that really works for you. So that's like a really cool, like, because I've seen other fighters do that. They got a little man bun here.
Yeah, I don't know. I've always like, I don't know. I guess I've always had my hair long. I always was like, when I really started competing, it was kind of like, oh, I got to keep this short. It was like, it's just not who I am.
Yeah.
And then I finally just started kind of like messing around. Well, usually it was like, we're like watching Uriah Faber, and as kind of time went on, a lot more guys like Ian McCall, like these guys have long hair and they were just tying it up, and I'm like, yeah, you know what, I can do that too.
Yeah.
Like I don't have to choose between this or that. I can just tie my hair up, and then at that time too, it's like I'm very big at understanding, like you have to fight, but there's a marketing aspect too, and it's like you look like everybody else, like I want to have something, and when you go in the cage, you don't have a whole lot to use as a marketing tool, and it's like, as messed up as that sounds, now that I just kind of said that, it's like I use my hair as a marketing tool.
Yeah, no, I mean,
anyway.
Think
my period, but you do, like, guys, a lot of people like I talk to, it's like, like Uriah Faber, like a lot of people are like, oh, that's that guy with like, got the long hair and walks up with the headband and stuff, and I'm like, dang, I never thought like that would be something people would like relate or like notice, to the point where like that's how they remember them, associate. That was what I was looking for. And so like, yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. So how I end up getting the nickname Viking. Viking is F. Well, I was like barely a week in at Pura Vida, and they're kind of like, like, yeah, wait, my coach Jay Clipp, he's like, so what do you think about if we start calling you Viking is F? And I'm like, sure. Like, it works. Like, I already have a nickname, and I'm kind of like, I was kind of committed to it, but I'm like, the more I thought about it, at first I was like, okay, but I thought about it, and I'm like, yeah, I think that fits better. Like, not only that, for me, is like getting a coach to actually take the time to like nickname you, like that's pretty substantial. Like, that means you've made some impression in the team, and I was barely there for like a week or two when that conversation happened. So
wow.
I was like, heck yeah, let's do it. But yeah, so girlfriend braids my hair before my fights, and that's kind of my thing.
Exactly. Is she doing better now with her health?
Yeah, for the most part. We're she has Graves' disease, which is it's a thyroid problem.
Oh.
So what happens is, like, so Graves' disease, she was hyper. So her again, not a medical expert, just what we've experienced, but like from what I understand, like the thyroid makes too much of a chemical that your body it's making too much of it. Isn't regulating it, and then the kind of the downside of treating it though is you end up falling into hypothyroidism, where now your thyroid isn't producing enough. So we're kind of just struggling. She's doing better, but it's not ideal yet. But we're making progress forward to start being able to kind of get our lives back and get back on this career path, and because she wants this just as much as I do.
I see. Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, definitely a lot better. So no, I appreciate you asking me that. Like, it means a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. This is something also that I'm glad you shared, because a lot of people don't understand, like, every fighter has lives too, and like every fighter's dealing. A lot of the UFC fighters, a lot of the people you see on TV, for example, they have kids and stuff like this. So like that's an extra dimension of stuff, and it just everyone has lives. Everyone they have their struggles, and then the people they care about have their struggles too.
Oh yeah, and it plays into a lot of the stuff we were talking about today. It's the mental aspect. Fighting is so much more mental than physical. You get a guy that maybe doesn't have the best technique and the best cardio in the world, but in his mind it's a steel lockbox, and you can't break that. He's a tough opponent. He might be arguably tougher than a guy that's got everything else but a good has a good mental integrity. And those play into that. And it's hard because I do see a lot of keyboard warriors that, like, especially with UFC fighters, it's like, they're talking about, something that happens in their life. Some people are very compassionate about it, but other people are like, you're a fighter, get over it. It's like, doesn't work like that.
It doesn't work like
it's
that.
Like a lot of those people that write that too, it's like, you could have something happen that's maybe half as bad, and you're calling in for work, or, you're rearranging your whole life because of it too. It's like, now I'm doing something that is, believe it or not, a full-time job, and on top of that, it comes at the expense of my health. Even if I do good, if I do good in a fight, I'm still getting hit, I'm still taking damage, and now I've got other things to juggle on top of that too that maybe doesn't help me. There's times where for me it's like staying home, making sure my girlfriend's okay, just worrying, just the fact of worrying, and your brain only has so much space to manage and focus on stuff, and all of a sudden you have pieces of that going other places. And fighting, maybe I'd say 80% of that space has got to be fighting. Maybe even more, especially like if you're in camp or something, and now you have unexpected things happening, and you have to manage that. And people don't get that, and they're very quick to judge that, like, oh, you're a fighter, deal with it. It's like, it doesn't work like that.
Exactly. I'm so glad you're sharing this. It's just the humanity of this, man. And so much of it, I think, gets lost in like the pomp and the hype, especially like we talked about branding, right? Most of those big promotions like the people that they can brand well, like the Conor McGregors and the Israel Adesanyas. So people like only see the glamour and like the smack talk, and that they don't see the other side, the human side, like how many surgeries some of these people have had, how many like mental hospital visits, how many like times sitting in their room crying. Like that's stuff that should be portrayed too.
Right, it should be. The problem is though, I think for some reason, I don't know if it's because of the fact that it's fighting or something, there seems to be this human condition sometimes that kind of that comes off almost as boring to people. Like you look at guys that you look at competitors that are very humble and very quiet, they're very hard to market for some reason. And I'm like, that's kind of what martial arts is for me anyway. Like, it's that letting your actions do more than your talking, but it seems like people don't quite. Like Amanda Nunes is a fantastic example of phenomenal fighter, pretty good, like her fighting is so much, it's fun to watch. I mean, she's beating people that, like, especially like that Cyborg fight, like Cyborg's, just this wrecking ball of a woman, and Nunes kind of like changed that tide, changed that perspective. And the whole time, like, it seemed like people were more focused on the fact that, like, oh, she's boring, like she doesn't talk a lot, she's very quiet, she's very humble. I think, even if I remember right, part of the UFC marketing team too is even like, she's really hard to market. They ended up focusing more on marketing Cyborg because they couldn't market Nunes. And I'm like, man, that's kind of a warped sense. Like, you have a marketing team. Their job is to market. You can't tell me that they can't.
Can't find something, right? There's always something.
Take your quiet, humble, almost samurai-esque personality and the way she carries herself, and use that as the like marketing thing. I don't know. I mean, I don't know a whole lot about marketing, but I feel like you could spin that in like, martial arts originated from guys that were quiet or tried to carry themselves as quiet. It's like, it's funny that it seems like I don't know if it's a human condition or what it is, but it seems like you have to be aggressive and you have to talk and you have to be a fighter and aggressive more than just fighting. You have to be in all other aspects of who you are as a person to maybe be interpreted as interesting.
And maybe it's just a sign of the times too. Like nowadays, because of internet and all that, every one of us, right? Every one of us needs to be our own brand. We have to think about that. Like, because we're literally always selling ourselves. People are judging us based on our social media accounts and our LinkedIn, work history and everything, right? So literally it forces every one of us to be like a version of us that isn't necessarily completely authentic. And it's kind of sad, but I think it's just what we have to accept. But it also...
It is.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I don't know. I have a tendency to maybe kind of go out on tangents, but no, it is. Well, I guess I just think about it from like a fighter aspect. It is. You have to like watch how you are reacting to things and talking about things, and that in itself is hard to do too. Again, I'm sure somebody out there is gonna be like, "Well, welcome to the fight game. That's part of business, like whatever." Yeah, I get it. I get that. I'm not complaining necessarily. It's just that is the reality of it. But I'm still not going to deny that it isn't frustrating. Yeah. Sometimes I'd like to let people, actually see maybe me more as who I am as a person, not just as a fighter, and like the composure and stuff. Like, it's nice to be able to talk to you about, some of the not fighting stuff and kind of, some more personal things that, understand, like, it's not taking me off of who I am as a fighter, and it isn't something that allows you to question my integrity. I'm still me. I'm still a fighter at the end of the day. I still work hard. I still like challenges, but it is what it is still.
Yeah. And the other thing, just talking to you, you got the standard Minnesota type of slight accent. I think if you keep going with this, like we should totally like brand you like you're the Minnesota Viking or something. I mean, unfortunately that's been taken. That's like a football team or whatever. But like, there's something about being Minnesota and a Viking that's really charming and like in this brand. So like in the future we could talk about this. I'm sure we gotta have that Minnesota as part of you. It's like I could tell you're a really decent, nice guy, like classic Midwestern type of dude. And it's just like, but you also got this fighting thing. It's just like there's something to be done there. So like, in the future, let's definitely work on that. It's kind of cool, like talking to you. I like every time we talk about Minnesota, we talk about kind of like stuff. The accent comes through, like the slight like a Minnesota accent comes through. It's really cool.
It was like getting ready for this. I thought to myself, I'm like, man, I wonder if people are gonna like think I have an accent, because I hear people say that a lot that aren't from. Well, so I'm from Wisconsin, but we all share, I guess, a Midwest.
Yeah, exactly. That area, the kind of the northern part of the Midwest, lots of like Scandinavians and stuff went there. So like all of you have a slightly different. So I grew up in Illinois for a little bit. So the Illinois accent's a little softer than kind of what you guys have. You guys, certain words you guys say almost sound Canadian slightly. So it's like a really funny kind of like mixed. But either way, it's really cool.
Because I'm around other people that we all sound alike, so I don't think about it too much. I have an uncle that lives in Nevada, and he comes up, and he's sometimes just like he'll just sit there and laugh. He's like, "You guys sound ridiculous." He's like, I'm so glad I don't sound like that anymore. Yeah,
it's pretty funny, but I'm sure people will listen to Californians, and especially I'll tell you, that like Valley Girl accent people associate with Californians. What I realized is, people in LA actually don't really talk like that. You know who talks like that? People from NoCal. People from like Northern California really talk with this kind of accent that feels like they're from the Valley. But like the Valley Girl accent isn't actually really from even the Valley. Like I've never met anyone from LA that talks like that. I've only met Northern California people. Okay, all right. So I'm from.
That's funny you say that though, because like even with the Midwest, it's like one of the worst stereotypes that like accent and like vernacular wise is thinking we sound super Canadian. Like I think the problem is like you have like Fargo and stuff. Like you have those you have like that series, the movie, and then you had that series.
Yeah.
Where everybody talked with this super like Dutch Canadian like very thick accent. It's like a lot of people don't actually sound like that around here. Like contrary to popular belief, we do not. Well, maybe it's just me not hearing it, but I don't think we got that thick of an accent. Like it's more of like a Upper Peninsula, like Michigan thing, Canada. And it's that's funny that you say that, because it's like a lot of people too think like, oh, everybody sounds like that, and it's like, no, we don't.
Exactly. Wow. Dude, Saul, I'm gonna go to my next interview soon, but this was probably one of the coolest conversations, and I'm going to try to get this out tonight. So for those of you watching, I definitely want to bring Saul back because, we talked mostly about combat sports and, the life and the different aspects of it, but I definitely want to bring you back also, like, talk more about other aspects of martial arts, like self-defense, difference between fighting in the ring and fighting outside and stuff like that. So I'll want to bring you back for that.
I'd love that.
Totally. And if you guys, Fight Commentary Reviews, have questions, we can do another video where it's like maybe Saul will answer some of your questions, and then we can like devote the second part of the interview to kind of like the more self-defense, maybe some of the more spiritual, philosophical parts of martial arts. So
I'd love that.
Totally. So guys, everyone watching, Saul Stevens, I'll put a lot of links, and there'll probably be footage overlaid, and we will talk to him again very soon, man. So, Saul, thank you so much again.
All right, thank you, Jerry. I appreciate it. It's an honor.
Definitely. I'm going to stop recording now, and then we can talk a little after I stop recording. But for those of you watching, Fight Commentary Breakdowns, share this, etc. Any other fighters want to interview, you know where to come. All right, guys. Talk to you guys soon.